Hi guys, so we are back today again. So in case you guys do not know me, I'm Financial Missy here, and I do have a partner here who is actually, this side, who is actually our dear trade engineer who is going to give us very fantastic tips on whether it's a good time to actually trade the market. Right? So I'm pretty sure that everybody is very excited on what we are going to expect moving forward from the market. Are we going to, um see a bull rally, or is this a false breakup, or is the market go down? So it's a very exciting time for all of us. I'm pretty sure about that. And let's hear from the trade engineer to actually welcome you guys as well.
Yes, thanks, Financial Missy. Hello, everyone. This is the trade engineer once again, right? Sharing with all of you, the market, the stock tips for today. Yep, and as what we have shown on the banner, right? We are actually going to discuss about this particular stock called SQ, right? So, for all those who might not be familiar, right? Actually, this stock was known as Square, but I think just very recently, it has actually changed the name from Square to Block, right? Actually, because of it signifies its impending, foray into the cryptocurrency scene, right? So today we'll be delving into greater detail, right, of this stock, whether it's a buy, whether it's time to buy now, or it's better to actually wait, right? And without further ado, let me share my screen. All right. Yes. So yes, we are going to talk about this stock block and analyze whether it is a buy now. Right. Yep. But before we begin, right? Yeah. If you are here with us live, do click on that like button so that we know that you are here with us live. Right. And before we actually go in depth into SQ, right? As always, we shall do a quick follow up, right? A quick recap of our last stock pick. And before, if you have been following our last stock pick, right, it was actually Roblox, right? So if you haven't checked out that video, right, you can always check back our last week video, right? The link is actually shown on my page, right? So you can check it out if you haven't already checked out already. Right, so quick recap, right, of Roblox, right, ticker symbol RBLX, right? So this was the chart I showed last week, right, where we actually drew this downtrend line, right, on the daily chart, right, and it was actually attempting to break out of this downtrend line, right, and we also saw the MACD also had a crossover, right, into the positive region, right. So that was some signs of right. And what we mentioned then as well, right, is not just on the downtrend line, right? You're testing this downtrend line resistance, right? It hasn't really break it convincingly, but it was on the verge, right? The MACD, right, both on the daily and the hourly MACD has crossed over, right? But on the bear side of things, right, we haven't yet seen a convincing breakout of that downtrend line, right? And the first resistance was also pretty close at about $53 to $54, right? So we look back at the chart here, right? It's actually corresponding to this horizontal line. So it's actually quite a short distance away. Right, and if we look at the hourly time frame, right, RSI is also on the overbought region. Yep, and as we all know, the overall market sentiment is volatile. Right, so what do we suggest? What did I suggest last week? So basically, what I suggested was we should adopt a wait and see approach, right? For those high risk takers, you want to do some scalp trading, right? We could actually enter at that time, right? And take the profit at the first resistance point, which is around this $53 to $54. Yep, but if you are lower risk and you are actually going to swing it for a longer period of time, you might actually might actually want to wait for more confirmation, right? So that's the suggestion I had last week for this particular stock. So let's fast forward, right? 1 week later, right? What happened ever since then, right? So ever since then, right, we can see that the last 5 trading days, right, we actually seen a sustained breakout from this downtrend line, right? So it's the same downtrend line. It has actually broken above this level, right? And it is currently trading above this line. right? So actually on the first day, right, on Monday, it was actually a red candle, right? It was actually, kind of resisted by it. But, finally on Tuesday, it actually broke out with a green candle. And ever since then, it has been staying above this downtrend line, right? And if you look at the horizontal resistance, right, it actually hit exactly where we pointed out, right? Exactly, spot on at $53, right on 23rd of March, right? And immediately after hitting that resistance point, it actually came down, it actually retraced back down slightly, right? And if you look at the MACD, right, MACD-Y has still remained positive, right, during this whole period of time. So in conclusion, right, if we look back, right, it was actually a win, right? It was actually, behaving according to our trading plan, right? Not entirely, but about 90% it has went according to plan, right? So if we actually, entered, on Tuesday, right, on this green candle over here, right, where we saw a strong support, as the downtrend line, right? We could have, entered at a price about $46.50, right? And if we took profit, right, at the first resistance point, right, which corresponding to $53, the very next day, right, on Wednesday, 23rd of March, right, we could have already gained 14%, right, in just one day, right? So if you have, actually taken this trade, congrats to you, right? It has, actually went according to the plan, right? But for those of you, who are, low risk takers who might not have entered, yeah, you can, still monitor, right? It might still have further upside, but, do take note the last trading day, right? It was a red candle, right? So we do have to see whether this downtrend line still remains as a strong support moving forward. Yep. And at this juncture, right, if you are liking or loving what we have been sharing so far, right, don't forget to click that button, right, to let us know that you are enjoying our sharing so far, right? Do click on that like or love button. And now, right, without further ado, let's move on to our stock pick for today, which is none other than Block or Square, right, as it was previously known. Right. So yes, this is their new, company symbol, Block, right? It's pretty cool. I think it's animated as well. Yep. So we are talking about Block today. Yep. And the ticker symbol is still at SQ. Yep. So this is actually, the overall price chart on the daily time frame for Block or SQ, right? So let's quickly go through, right, this price chart. You can see that, previously it was hovering about $40+, right? Before about 2020, it actually saw this steep climb, right, all the way to about the high was about $289, right? And ever since then, right, ever since it hit that $289 sometime around in 2021 August, I believe, right, it has actually corrected down, right, more than 50%, right, from 289 to a closing price of 130, right, as of last Friday, right. So there's a 55% drop, right? That is a quite substantial decrease, right? And the big question here again is, why? Right? You've seen that this stock has actually grown quite substantially, right? So why did it suddenly, drop so substantially? So to answer that, right, let's look back at some of the recent news for Block. Right, so this is taken from Yahoo Finance, right? Quite recently at the start of this year, January 15th. Right, at that time, Block actually hit a 52-week low, right? And it was actually clobbered, right, ever since it rebranded, because I think it rebranded from basically Square to Block sometime in December, right, 2021, right? So based on an article, right, it has been on a decline, right? I think primarily because there was this rotation, right, out of growth stocks, right? So if you've been following the news, most of the US growth stock have been falling, right, for quite some time, right? So Block is also considered as a growth stock, and it has also not been spared, right? And this came on the backdrop of all those interest rate hikes from the Fed. Right. So, at that time, it was already down about 31%, right? So, there was also this name change on the December 1st of 2021. Yep, but that every job can come about as a buying opportunity, right? So question here, right, is whether there are going to be catalysts for this company, right? So from another article, right, this from investors.com, right, they actually asked this question, right, whether this is actually a buy, right, and they actually point out a few things that could be the catalyst for this company, right? So there is that rebranding, right, to block. There's this afterpay deal as well as Bitcoin, right? So actually moving into Bitcoin as well. Yep, so if you're following block or SQ stock, right? I think some of the things that come to mind would be the COVID-19 pandemic is associated with that, right? It actually was one of the beneficiaries from the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as cryptocurrency, right? Because it's actually going into this, right? And there's actually now another acquisition, right, for this Square stock, right? So let's further delve into some of these catalysts, right? So in the most recent earnings, right, in December quarter, right, it actually reported earnings that actually topped analyst estimates, right? Primarily due to its cash app, that cash app growing quite substantially, right? It actually wasn't slowing as much as analysts has feared, right? So that's a good sign, right? It shows that the company is actually doing better than expected, right? And the foray into blockchain or cryptocurrency, right? So it actually is moving into blockchain. That's why it's called block now, right? And it has started to embrace the cryptocurrency, primarily Bitcoin, right? In fact, some people they have a view, right, that Bitcoin is the customer acquisition tool for this particular stock. Right, and it also has this afterpay deal, right? So the irony, right, is that after it closed this acquisition deal, right, it actually dropped, right? The stock actually dropped further, right? So there could be a concern, right? It may not be entirely a good news for Square on this afterpay deal, right? So what is this afterpay, right? This afterpay actually is competing in this buy now pay later market. Right, so if you think about buy now, pay later, right, it is actually first thing that comes to mind is credit card, right? So if you have been using credit card, I'm sure all of us have, right? So credit card has that advantage, right, where you can actually buy now, right, and actually pay later, right, because you're buying on credit. So this afterpay, right, is something similar to a credit card, right, in that sense, right? So a lot of people might be concerned, right, whether afterpay can indeed compete in this market, right, and whether it's actually a losing acquisition for Square, right? So that this may or may not be such a good news, very good catalyst for Square, but we shall see, right? We shall see how this pans out in future. Right, and another aspect which I mentioned just now was on the Bitcoin, right, the cryptocurrency aspect of things, right? So it is, in planning to, go deeper into this Bitcoin mining, right? In fact, it actually mentioned, right, it will create a new business line to help developers build financial services product focused on Bitcoin. And in fact, it has, quite a substantial amount of investment in Bitcoin, right? On top of its 50 million purchase, right? And as well, right, there's another thing that they are in the works of doing or developing is actually a Bitcoin hardware wallet. So they are really going all out into this Bitcoin, right, or cryptocurrency, right? Hence the name Block. Right, and COVID-19, right, as you mentioned at the start of this article, right, it has also benefited from COVID-19, right, primarily because of its cash app, right. In fact, right, it actually managed to increase the number of active users, right, and they actually managed to tie in this cash app with Bitcoin, right. Yep. So why did it actually gain during the COVID-19 pandemic? Right, because this cash app was actually seen as the digital alternative to traditional banks, right? That's one of the reasons, I guess, yeah, that was attributed. right? And so this cash app, could be the stimulus for Square stock, in future, right? Whether it can grow substantially in future might also be dependent on how this cash app actually pans out. Right, and other catalysts, right? Block stock is also moving up market to bigger sellers, right? So it's actually targeting larger business, right? So that is something that might be of huge potential, right? In fact, right, it actually is ranked among the top 10 fintech companies now, right? And it also providing software for point of sales and back officers, right? So it's also trying to expand, and progress, and all these might be very exciting, right? If all these actually take off, right? And there are there also these instant deposits that speed up the process, right? The company, right, this Square company, right, also allows merchants to immediately receive payments instead of waiting a few days for settlement, right? So all this, it's actually trying to compete against other global companies, like WorldPay and Global Payments, right? So all these, if you actually manage to compete against them and win against them, right, it might be something that might be very exciting for this stock. Right, so these are just some of the catalysts and some of the recent news for Block or SQ, right? But the big question here, right, is once again, what is the future direction for this particular stock? And to do that, being the trade engineer myself, right, I will usually look at the technicals, right, to give us some insight into what will happen in the future. Yep, but before I do so, right, once again, if you are enjoying our sharing so far, don't forget to click that like or love button. Right, and let's now check out that price chart for more details. And let me change screen now to the price chart. All right, now here we have the price chart for Block. And for this price chart of Block, right, is on the daily time frame, right? So you can see, right, I have actually drawn two lines here, right? The downtrend line as well as the uptrend line, right? And also put in the RSI and the MACD, right? So you can see that it has recently crossed over this downtrend line, right? It is currently trading above this downtrend line, right? For now, but in the last few trading days, I'm seeing some red candles, right? So whether this downtrend line can remain at the support now, that is the question, right? That we don't know, right? But we shall see, right? And it has also crossed this horizontal line, right? Which was previously the resistance, right? It was tested previously several times before it finally broke out over here, right? But recently it has fallen back, right? And it seems like it has slightly broken below this, right? Because now this is the support, right? It actually slightly broken this as the support, right? So that is something you have to watch out for to see whether it remains trade. The price will trade below this line in future, right? And the MACD wise, right? MACD for the daily is positive, but the gap is narrowing, right? So that's something we have to watch out. But nevertheless, it's still positive. And if you look on the shorter time scale, right? On short time scale, it's a bit more bearish, right? At least on the MACD side, right? You can see that MACD has been negative for quite some time already, right? Yep. So whether it cross over in the positive region is also something that we have to watch out for, right? To see whether it can go back to the bullish side of things, at least for the short-term time scale. Right. So that is some quick summary, some quick technical analysis for this Block stock. And without further ado, let me go back to my slides. Yes. Okay, and let's give a brief summary of what I've just discussed right earlier, right? Just to recap, in case you have missed out what I've been sharing, right? So on the bull side of things, right, we have seen that cross of the downtrend line, right? It's broken above that downtrend line, and it's currently trading above this level, right? The price is currently trading above this level. The daily MACD is still positive, and that is good, but the gap is narrowing, right? So we do have to watch out for that. On the bear side of things, though, right, the horizontal line, right, which was previously the resistance, but now it's the support, right? There was a level about 131 to 133 US dollars, It has recently broken below that support, right? In fact, I think the last closing price was 130.33, right? So it has slightly broken below this 131 level, right? So we have to watch out in the next week whether the price can, once again reclaim this support, or will it continue to go below, right? Continue to go below this price. If it does, then we do have to watch out for further signs of bearishness, right? And see where's the next support level. And on the shorter time scale, right, on the MACD, right, we have seen that it is negative, right? So whether it will cross over a positive region is something we do have to watch out, but as of now, it is bearish on the shorter time scale, right? And as always, this market is still volatile, right? With the Ukraine-Russia war, right, as well as other news in the market, right? So we do have to watch out for this as well. So what should we do for trading, right? So this is my suggested approach once again, right? As at this point, I would like to put a disclaimer again that this is my own opinion, right? Please do your own due diligence before entering or exiting a trade, right? So for this particular stock, for block, right? What I suggest is we should adopt a wait and see approach first, right? So because we have seen that horizontal support slightly broken, right? That 131 to 133 level, right? It has been slightly broken, right? But it is not a convincing break, right? So we do have to watch out to see whether it is going to continue to persist, right? Is price going to continue to trade below this level, or will it reclaim this level and go back up, right? So that might be a fake breakdown, right? So if it's the former, right? If it's continue to trade below this line, right? We do have to wait for next support before entering a long position. Yeah, but if it is a fake breakdown, right? If we claim this as a support level, right? Then we can consider a long entry with a tight stop loss, right? And last but not least, right? We do have to check out that macroeconomic outlook, right? Because if anything happens in the market, right? It will affect all stocks, right, including block, right? So we do have to watch out for any news in the market, right? Not just the news, overall macro news, but also news regarding this particular stock. Yep, and that concludes my portion, for SQ today. And just a few reminders, right, as always, right? If you like our sharing, right, for today, don't forget to click the like or love button, or click that share button, right? So that more people around you can benefit from our sharing. Yep, and if you haven't already followed us on our social media pages, do follow us as well, right? I have my Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, right? Handles are shown here. FINANCIALMissy has hers as well, right? Handles are shown here as well. Yep, and leave a comment below on what you think, right? Of our sharing today, as well as suggest the next stock, right? If you like to know what US stock you like to us to analyze next, right? Do leave it in the comments, right? So that we can take it up, and we might actually share it in the next week. Yep. So if you're tuning in for the first time, right? We do this every Sunday, right, at 4 p.m. Singapore time, right, on our pages, right? So today is on FINANCIALMissy page. Next week will be on my page. And last but not least, right, I have a upcoming Facebook Live this evening as well on the Binance SG Investor. Yep. So for all those of you who are cryptocurrency investors or traders, you might want to tune in this evening at 9:30 p.m. on the Binance SG Investor Facebook group. Right. So today I'll be talking more about Ripple and Bitcoin, right? Something that I have mentioned in my previous video. And today I'll be doing some further analysis of the price movement, right? In fact, I will actually share how I actually predicted it correctly, right? Based on my last week prediction. Right. And with that, right, I've come to the end of my segment. Now I shall hand the time over to FINANCIALMissy, right, for her her insights into this block or SQ stock. Yep, over to you, FINANCIALMissy.
Hey, thank you so much for Trade Engine. It's been very exciting to really understand how you actually break it down so simply to actually understand how do we trade the market. It's so exciting, right? So like most of the people likes to learn how to has fast profit and everything. So trading is one strategy that you guys can actually obtain quick money, like quick and safe money, if you know how to trade properly. So I hope that you guys actually learned a lot from our dear trade engineer and his wonderful sharing. So if you guys actually like what he actually just shared, show us some love, like and share this thing so that more people will get to know us, and also that they will be able to learn from what we actually share as well. Yeah. So just do us some favor here, just like show us some love, like and share this Facebook Live. So without further ado, let me share my screen where I will bring you guys through the fundamental as well as a bit of technical analysis to look at how we actually invest in SQ, right? So very excitingly, if you guys are here with me, just like and share while I share my screen. Share, yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, very interestingly, today we are talking about block. Sorry, I didn't put a nice GIF like what our dear trade engineer actually did. My block doesn't move, but yeah, it's still a very nice logo over there. So on Friday itself, right, block, right, which is also known as SQ Square block, yeah. It actually closed at $130.33 on Friday, of which it shows a $4.73 decline, equivalent to about 3.5% thereabout. um yeah, but before I start proper, I want to actually emphasize to you guys that whatever we shared, right, it's never intended to be a financial advice, yeah. So everything shared is our personal point of view on the US equity market and that particular company, and our own personal investment strategy. So please do not take what we actually share as a personalized financial advice. Please do your own due diligence before committing to any investment, yeah. So in the moral of the story is we are always wrong. So please do your own due diligence and know your own strategy such that you can execute the strategy that works well for you guys to actually invest or trade in the market confidently with a lot of conviction. Yeah, sounds good. Okay. First and foremost, as usual, I normally want to touch on the microeconomy to talk about what is actually going on with the economy right now. It's very apparent that this slide has not been changed much since the past few weeks because nothing much has changed. We know about the interest rate high, of which increased about 0.25 points, and there will be 6 more times hike in the upcoming year. I mean, yeah, in 2022. How aggressive it will be, we do not know because the Fed will be the one who actually monitor the situation, the inflation problem in the United States. As we all know that it was actually recently published that the inflation in United States is 7.9%, which is very, very high. So how aggressive can the interest rate hike be? We do not know. We need to take a more conservative approach to actually look at this whole big picture, right? So last week I also mentioned that Ukraine-Russia war is still ongoing on, and during then it was there's news outlets saying that Turkey is ready to be the mediator of the whole situation where Putin and Zelensky will actually meet, but so far for the past 1 week it doesn't really seem the case. So whether it's going to prolong longer, highly likely, I would say that it's likely going to be prolonged longer. Will it evolve into a worse situation? This is something that we do not know. Unless we are, part of the army, but hopefully not. Hopefully not. Okay, please, everyone, please be safe. Stay in wherever you are, and be a good citizen. Yeah. so so that's for that. And yeah, you know that the interest rate high, the supply and demand problem, the Ukraine-Russia war is actually causing a lot of supply chain deficit, right? That is actually long standing in the economy right now. I'm not sure whether you guys actually follow me through my market analysis last Tuesday, but in case you guys didn't, maybe let me just go through a bit of what I actually shared last Tuesday to share with you guys what is my take on the market right now. Okay, let me share my second screen. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. So basically this, on Tuesday itself, I actually shared whether the bull market is finally here. Like, because you have seen like ever since the Fed actually announced the interest rate to be 0.25 points higher for this upcoming one, we have seen actually more than a week of a bull market already. So is it really, really a bull, or is it a fake breakout? So is that something for us all to really consider and take it in? We need to internalize the news that is being actually, shared with us, because news are always delayed. Don't always rely on news. In fact, you can't rely on news to actually invest or trade the market. It's actually very risky. You need to do your own analysis to see what is exactly going on, right? Okay, so as mentioned, we know supply chain deficit more or less because of the environment sustainability and stuff like that, and also the technology advancement. So that all along has been like long-standing supply chain deficit, and coupled with COVID-19 pandemic, right? The supply chain is actually even more in a more deficit position lah. Because why? Because of the during the pandemic, right, a lot of factories are actually being converted to produce like PPE or medical or masks or all those kind of a healthcare related manufacturing stuff. And because of the global closure, right, there's also a lot of like restrictions in terms of goods transportation and all. So supply chain was worsened during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also there was a minor recession during then lah, of which is a lot stimulated, right, and and assisted by the Fed, right? So all in all, spending for COVID-19 during then was actually 13 trillion, as of mid 2021. I do not how many know I do not know how many of you guys have actually seen a trillion, but I personally have not. So 13 trillion is a lot of money there, guys. So yeah. And it's because of this sudden influx of money that the US printed and printed and printed that caused inflation. Right. So as mentioned, the Fed announced a 0.25 percentage point interest rate hike, of which it will increase 6 more times this year, and more aggressive interest rate hike if needed. Right. And also the Russian-Ukraine war, US also US actually gave Ukraine 13.6 billion worth of USD. Is really a lot of money. So you guys can see that the United States is printing and printing and printing a lot of money to help the economy in the US, and now to also help Ukraine. So there's a lot of printing over there, right? Of which it causes a lot of excessive debts that the US is currently undertaking. And of course, the sanctions that's going on, right, is a bit scary lah. In the sense that I'm not sure how many guys of you guys know, Russia itself, right, is the fourth biggest transporter of oil, right? And Russia is the second biggest producer of natural gas, second biggest, yeah, and of which both Ukraine and Russia are one of the biggest producer of neon. Neon is a component that's very essential in the production of semiconductors. So you can see how this sanction is actually impacting the whole economy. The whole economy, not within Russia and Ukraine, but Russia, Ukraine, United States, Europe, Singapore. Actually, the whole world is actually interconnected. Like if I draw these lines, I mean the connections for you guys, it's very very clear that now we are not living in an isolated land. That's for sure. Everything is interconnected, and whether a World War III is upcoming, it's something that we do not know. Hopefully not. Fingers crossed, please do not. But should there be a World War III, then I guess we all need to invest already, like if that's the case. So so let's pray hard that nothing is going to happen, yeah? All right. Okay, if otherwise historically, right, if you see the trend from this particular graph itself, you know that back then in 2001, the US debt to GDP is not that huge as compared to what we are facing now. But the period of recession, right, denoted by the gray bar, right, is getting wider and wider and wider. What does it actually means is that the higher the debt to GDP ratio, the longer would the recession be. Right, it's very clear from this chart. Even though in
Sorry,
2021, yes,
Financial Missy, I think you're not showing your screen.
I'm not sharing my screen.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Oh, sorry, my bad.
No problem.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. Yeah.
All right. Yes, can see now.
Okay, cool. Hey, sorry guys, why nobody tell me? Right, so in 2001, there's a dot-com bubble precipitated by the 911 attack, and there's a lot of major accounting scandals during then as well. And the recession, right, actually lasted about 8 months. Moving forward, you've got the 2008, the Great Recession, right, precipitated by the collapse of housing bubble. There's a lot of foreclosure. There's a lot of defaulting of debts and stuff like that. And during then, we also saw that the oil prices spiked. Recession lasted for 18 months. 2020 COVID-19 recession precipitated by global closure. In some report, it says that it's a very transient, small recession, but according to this particular source I actually got from the US website, it says that the recession is actually 2 years and counting still, right? But if you guys actually read the news, you would know that unemployment rate now is actually at a lower point. So I guess one the good point of what the economy is actually telling us, right, that's giving us confidence is unemployment rate is low. That is something that is of comfort. Why is that so? Because unemployment rate itself is a telltale sign of an impending recession. Then it's when there's a recession, it also signifies that the rate of unemployment actually spikes. If you look at this graph itself, every time you see a spike in unemployment rate throughout history for the past many years, past decade, right? You always see whenever there's a spike, there's a recession, right? So for now, the only sign that we are looking at that is not suggestive of a recession is actually low employment rate, as you can see from this particular chart. Otherwise, in terms of indicator, right, what we can learn from the current market, there are actually 4 indicators that I want to introduce you guys. The past is definitely not representative of the future, but it's something that we can always learn from it. So there are 4 indicators as mentioned. One is the Buffett indicator. 2 is the price indicator. 3 is the fear and greed index. Last but not least is the fear index that you guys actually needs to know. All right. So if you look at the Buffett indicator, what does the Buffett indicator tells us? Actually tells us that currently the market is overvalued. In fact, it's 53% higher than the long-term trend line. Okay, so what does it mean? If you look at the past, the from history, right? Every time when the market spike above +2 standard deviation, you will see that there's a crash. 2001 internet bubble, 2020. Are we going to meet a longer recession? That's a question to ask ourselves. Of course, this is only a prediction of the market. It's not representative of what is actually the situation. So take it with a pinch of salt. As long as something that helps us to give us a confidence level, why not, right? All right. So moving on, the oil price indicator as well. Whenever it spikes above the 50% standard deviation as well, you will see a recession. This is based on history, not based on me lah. Right. So currently the oil prices is going down, which is something of comfort to us as well. But it's something for us to keep a lookout to ensure that we go in at the right time. Okay. Third thing, fear and greed index. Very simply, currently the fear is at 38. Warren Buffett always says that buy at extreme fear, sell at extreme greed. So now the fear index is about 38. Do your own judgment whether it's time to enter. All right. Last but not least, look at the VIX indicator. So VIX indicator, guys, this deck of slides are not updated since my presentation on Tuesday. If I'm not wrong, currently the VIX is about 20 points there about. But nevertheless, in case you guys are new out there, you do not know what is VIX. VIX is actually a stress index to see the market volatility. So typically when people are fearful, people are stressed about the market outcomes, VIX will normally spike. So average pricing for VIX is about 17, 18-ish. So currently it's about 20, it's still slightly above the average, right? So there's still a little bit of amount of fear in the market right now. All right. Let me go back to my slide where I show you guys back to today's sharing session. Okay, cool. So I covered the microeconomy. Microeconomy is something very, very important that I really hope that you guys actually, understand and master the art of actually looking at the whole microeconomy, because it will affect us no matter what. Even if you are not investors already, by being a consumer of the market, it already affects us. Look at our inflation in Singapore even, right? So how is the market right now? So I actually suggested that, yeah, for the past few days, or in fact 2 weeks, you see the market is on an upwards trend, but are we really going through a bull market? My analysis is that, but guys, before I tell you about my analysis, that regardless of my analysis, is my personal point of view. Please do not take me for serious. It's just take it as a consideration, a pinch of salt. Yeah. So yeah, my analysis is that it will go within range for now until something significant that tells you that yes, the market is safe. Yes, the war has stopped. Yes, good news. Do not know what, but some good news that will actually breaks up the resistance. If otherwise, there needs to be bad enough news for it to break down the ceiling. So this is around my gauge of how the market will fluctuate. It might go a bit more higher before it coming down. That one, you can see that it's still within range. Yep. So this is my take for the market itself. Okay. So for block, coming back to block, what does block do? Block is so exciting, because it actually went all the way up and become all the overnight sensation during COVID period. So what exactly is block? Block is actually used to be known as Square. It's a payment gateway company, accepts card payment, provides reporting and analytic and next day settlement and stuff like that. It has a lot of different components. Okay, this is a very large chunk that I actually help you guys do some highlighting and stuff to actually helps to summarize what does Square actually does. So it provides hardware products including Mega Strip Reader, contactless and chip reader. They also have other gateways like Square Stand, Square Register, Square Terminal. They got Square Point of Sale, Square Appointment, Square Retail, Square this, Square that. A lot of squares everywhere, right? So it's not so rigid as they only do payment gateway, but rather they have other parts of the businesses as well. Very exciting. All right. So I guess this is why during COVID itself, it actually helps to, with whole COVID, the stay home, the quarantine actually gives people, this company gives people the options to actually venture into the different types of squares, right? To actually, like give gifts or, to do their online shopping, retail shopping and what's not. Very exciting, right? So for Square itself, it's headquartered in San Fran, California, and it's under the software infrastructure industry. Okay, but I do not know whether how many of you guys actually know that Square itself, right, has you can see here that it has a lot of additional products and services being provided. And one thing that the trade engineer actually mentioned is that Square changed its name to Block already. So Block, um, his CEO is somebody who is very into Bitcoin. So hence, there's a lot of talks about how Block is actually going to support Bitcoin, a payment gateway and stuff like that. And this company, yes, is very international. It actually venture up into Asia as well as in the West as well. But then the thing with Bitcoin is that 80%, right, of the cash app, right, the revenue, right, is actually from Bitcoin. So what does it mean is that, when the Bitcoin is not really being favored by investors, the retail, the consumers like us, you will see a corresponding, fluctuation in Square as well, right? And one question is, how are we actually doing accounting for Bitcoin when being accounted for in Square itself is a unknown lah. So that part is something that is a risk that as investors, if we decide to invest in this company, we need to pay attention to, right? If otherwise, in terms of valuation, we'll talk about it later. In terms of competitiveness, I'm not sure whether you guys know, but Square has a lot of competitors as well. That includes PayPal, that includes like Stripe and stuff like that. So Square is unique, but not so unique at the same time. Its niche is very, very narrow. All right. Okay. And last but not least, I wanted to highlight this point is the CEO of Square. I mean, sorry, I keep using Square, but it's Block now. So CEO of Block is actually Jack Dorsey. He is also a CEO of Twitter and Block. I do not know, man. Can a person like really, split himself into two different parts to, to talk about two different businesses? I'm not sure about that. Right? So I leave it to you guys to think about it, to ponder. If otherwise, financially, how is Block doing? Actually, it's not bad. We look at three different things, right, in terms of financial statement. We look at the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. In terms of the income statement, you know that year on year, yes, very good. The total revenue, the net income has been increasing. It's been very profitable. In fact, the net profit margin is at 0.94%. Not very ideal because 0.94% is actually quite low. But let's look on. The balance sheet current ratio is more than 1, which is good. The debt to equity ratio is more than 1 at 1.55. It just shows that this company, Block, is actually having a lot of debt, right? PG ratio less than 1, which is quite the ideal is less than 1, but in fact, the PG ratio for Square itself is 2.08. It just means that currently this company can be overvalued, right? In terms of cash flow, everything has been very well. Cash from operation, investment, as well as financial has been increasing, and also the free cash flow has been increasing as well, which is pretty decent, pretty good. Square as a growth company itself, right? I think for investors who wants to know whether Square is a company to invest in, you need to look at the long-term potential. How confident are you to actually invest in your money in a company that is currently, might or might not doing as well as you expected it, but you want to know whether there's actually growth potential for it. But for now, we know that this company is making money, although not as much, has high debt, and currently overvalued. Would you want to invest in some company that is undervalued and has growth potential, or something has growth potential and overvalued, of which limits the amount of growth? Right, that's something to think about. If otherwise, according to the discounted cash flow, we would know that the intrinsic value of Square itself, Block, is actually $81.01, which is overvalued right now, right? So, is it a good time to enter? You want to ask yourself. You always look at technical analysis, but for investment, it's very interesting because you don't have to dwell into like a 4-hourly time frame, 1-hourly time frame. Look at just day to day, 1 day time frame. That would be sufficient, right? So I actually put out a very simple chart using the simple moving average 50, 150. The purple line is actually the SMA 50. The blue line is SMA 150. So what does this SMA actually shows, right? It's actually just to show the medium term to long term trend of this particular company. Right now, the middle to long term trend is actually still downtrend because the blue is above the purple. There is no signs of reversal as yet in terms of middle to long term trend. But of course, if you look at the short term, if you zoom into the short term trend, all right, I actually denote it with the black solid lines over there. You know that recently, or rather for the past maybe few weeks, this particular company is on a short term upwards. How long can this upwards trend last is something we do not know. But one thing we know for now is based on the price that closed on Friday, it's actually at the higher 1/3 of the trend line. Of which, if you guys are thinking of entering this stock, probably you want to wait for some retracement goes down before you guys actually think of investing in this particular company, right? If you guys have a lot of conviction in this, it's something for you to actually put it into your watch list to see whether it's something that you are comfortable and interested in investing. So do your own due diligence, know your strategy, and decide for yourself whether this is of interest. If otherwise, I come to the last part of my sharing. Yep, if you guys actually find what we actually share to be very informative and useful, please do like, comment and share. And also, last but not least, follow us on our Facebook or Instagram pages, and do comment below. Let us know what are the stocks that you want us to actually analyze for you guys next week, and to discuss the potential of any stocks that's listed in the United States, right? So yeah, and okay, so yeah, so I've been giving out this strategy guide as well. You guys can actually sign up for it via my link below. Yep, today is actually the last day that I'm actually going to consolidate and actually send it out to people as well. So do sign up below. My take is very simple. Novice investors always do only three things, which is you buy the dip, you short the market, or when the market is down, you just turn a blind eye and don't want to look at it. But what are the other strategies that can help us to actually build a very solid and substantial portfolio regardless of market volatility will be found in this guide itself. So yep, sign up through this link bit.ly/investment secret, and you will have it by the end of today. Yeah, so this is the end of my session, my sharing. You guys like us? Yes, Carol. Yes. Please do your own due diligence, something that I cannot emphasize more. Yeah, so that is all. If you guys have any questions, please do leave it in a comment that we can help to actually answer. Yeah, anything. Right. Otherwise, just also put in the comments on what are the stocks that you want us to analyze for next week. It has been really a pleasure, to do this presentation for you guys every Sunday at 4 p.m. It's really very exciting because it helps us to actually analyze our, what our next topic as well. So who knows, we can be investors together in the same company. So yeah, can't see my hand. So the trade engineer, do you have anything that you want to share with the guys?
Oh yes, thanks, FINANCIALMissy, for sharing your take of block, as well as the whole macro economy of things, right? So, yep, just like to emphasize once again, right? Please do your own due diligence, right? As what Cal Pang also mentioned, right? Do your own due diligence, right? Yeah, it is very important, right? At this juncture, right? Because the markets are volatile, right? We do have to be careful and mindful, right? So whether you're investing or trading, right, you have to be careful, right, of what's going to happen, right? Thanks, Kel. Yep. Thanks for appreciating us, right? Yep. Yeah. So for those of you who've been watching, right, do leave your comments as well, right? Yeah. If you've got any burning stock you'd like us to share next week, next Sunday, right, do let us know, and we shall break it down for you, right, next Sunday. Yep. I think
Right. So
yeah, with that, I think we'll see you guys again next week. Right.
bye bye.
Bye bye.